What if the only way to catch the internet's most elusive criminals was for the FBI to become hackers themselves? Well, that's pretty much what happened. This is the story of how America's top law enforcement agency secretly built its very own army of hackers.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The date is April 13th, 2013. We're in Nebraska on some quiet, ordinary-looking suburban street. But inside one of these houses, a digital ghost is about to get a very, very real visit. And then, bam! An elite FBI strike team blows the front door clean off its hinges. Inside, there's a man at a desk, frantically scrambling to slam his laptop shut. But it's way too late for that. He's caught, just frozen in the beams of their flashlights.
But here's where the story gets really crazy. The man they just put in handcuffs, he isn't some mob boss or a terrorist. No. He's the acting cybersecurity director for a U.S. federal agency. So how on earth did the FBI find a ghost, an expert whose entire job was to stay invisible online? Well, that's the story we're going to unpack.
It all started when the FBI came to a pretty startling realization. To catch a totally new kind of criminal, they had to become a totally new kind of hunter.
At the very heart of the problem was a technology called the Tor network. Now, you should think of it as a serious double-edged sword. On one hand, it's an absolute lifeline for activists, journalists, and dissidents, people who need that shield of anonymity to stay safe. But on the other hand, that exact same shield becomes a fortress for criminals. For the FBI, it was like their most wanted targets had just vanished into thin air. Poof, gone. So back in 2012, the FBI tracks down the administrator of several child abuse forums on the dark web. Now, they could have just arrested him, shut it all down, end of story, but they didn't. They came up with this radical, almost wild idea. They asked themselves, what if we ran the sites? What if we could turn the criminal's safest space into the perfect trap?
So, to pull this off, they built a secret weapon, a piece of malware they called a Network Investigative Technique, or NIT for short. And honestly, it was brilliant. Here's how it worked. A user visits one of the sites, not knowing the FBI is now the one running the show. The malware, the NIT, it just silently downloads onto their computer. Then it uses a tiny hidden flaw in the Tor browser, and for just a split second, it punches a little hole in that wall of anonymity. And in that one moment, bam, the user's real IP address gets sent straight to an FBI server. The user sees nothing, they have no clue it even happened, but their cover is completely blown.
And the results of this first mission, codenamed Operation Torpedo, were just staggering. In just 2 weeks, they unmasked dozens of suspects all across the globe. But the most shocking catch of all, it was that man from the raid in Nebraska, Timothy DeFage, the very person whose job it was to protect a federal agency from these kinds of cyber threats. Just unbelievable. As one agent described it, it was like shining a flashlight into a pitch-dark cave and finally seeing the predator's eyes glinting back. For the first time, they weren't just hunting shadows anymore. They could actually see their targets. But, a success this huge brings up a really dangerous question. With a weapon this powerful, just how far were they willing to go? Because the experiment was officially over, and the real escalation was about to begin. Okay, so the very next operation was a massive escalation. I mean, if Operation Torpedo was like a sniper rifle, very targeted, very precise, this next phase was like casting a giant dragnet over an entire city. The target was a service called Freedom Hosting, and the FBI's whole approach changed. They went from hacking a few dozen known suspects to potentially thousands of unknown users, including people who had absolutely no criminal intent at all. You see, Freedom Hosting was huge. It hosted something like half of the entire dark web at the time. And that included things like secure email services used by totally normal people for privacy. So when the FBI took it over and deployed their malware, anyone who logged in, for any reason, got infected. This was the beginning of some serious digital collateral damage.
And this is where the ethical lines get incredibly blurry. I mean, is it acceptable to compromise the privacy of 90 innocent people just to catch 10 criminals? This wasn't just some theoretical problem anymore. This was the reality of the FBI's new tactic.
As you can imagine, privacy advocates were horrified. The ACLU pointed out that this wasn't targeted crime fighting. It was a bulk hacking operation against a service with plenty of lawful, legitimate users. The FBI wasn't just bending the rules. A lot of people argued they were completely breaking them.
But the Bureau wasn't slowing down, not at all. In fact, they were about to launch their biggest and most controversial hacking operation ever.
The target was a site called Playpen, one of the largest and most disturbing child abuse sites ever discovered. And just to give you a sense of the scale here, it had over 150,000 registered user accounts. This was their biggest target by far.
And once again, they didn't just shut it down. For 13 days, the FBI ran one of the internet's darkest corners from a government server. They deployed their malware and managed to unmask over 1,000 users. From a pure law enforcement perspective, it was an unprecedented success.
But here's the crucial point. All of this, the hacking of thousands of computers in countries all over the world, was done with just one single warrant issued by a single judge in Virginia.
And that, as you might guess, sparked a legal firestorm. Defense attorneys argued the warrant was totally illegal, that a judge in Virginia has no authority to order a search of a computer in Texas, let alone one in Australia or Germany. And you know what? Several federal judges agreed, throwing out evidence and dismissing cases. The FBI's entire strategy was suddenly on very thin ice.
So how did the government respond to this legal crisis? Did they scale things back? Nope. They decided to change the rule book. In 2016, the Department of Justice quietly pushed through an amendment to a procedural rule known as Rule 41. This change essentially legalized the very tactic that was being challenged in court. It gave judges the explicit authority to issue a single warrant to hack thousands of computers anywhere in the world as long as their location is hidden by technology like Tor.
I mean, you can see the whole evolution right here. It started as a targeted experiment in 2012. That escalated into a massive indiscriminate dragnet, which then sparked a legal crisis. And that crisis was solved by just rewriting the rules to make the whole thing official government policy.
What started as a secret ad hoc trick had evolved into a whole new era of law enforcement. The FBI's hacker army was now a codified, permanent part of its arsenal, a tool as crucial to modern investigations as wiretaps were in the past.
So here's the crucial takeaway. The FBI's secret hacker army is no longer a secret. It's an official, legal part of their arsenal. The debate is no longer about if they should have this power. They do. The only question left is, who's next?